My name is Floyd Denton. I'm 57 years old, and I have been writing checks for a family that stopped making room for me 2 years before I understood what was happening. The night I figured it out, I was in my recliner watching the Reds lose by 4 runs when my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. A photo post from Glenda, my son-in-law's mother. I tapped it without thinking. 47 photos. My granddaughter Willa's kindergarten spring recital at the elementary school on Birch Crossing Road, 14 miles from where I was sitting. Willa in a yellow paper sunflower costume with her hair in 2 braids. My grandson Declan cheering from the second row. My daughter Lacey crying into a tissue, the good kind, and in the front row, with the best angle in the auditorium and a handmade banner that said Willa, we love you, was Alvin, Bo's father, sitting next to Glenda in chairs they'd clearly carried in from home. I scrolled all 47 photos. Nobody had forgotten to tell me the date. I want you to understand that, because it took me a week to get there myself. The recital had been listed in the school newsletter I never received, because I'm not on the school contact list. The school contact list has Bo's parents on it. It does not have me. I put my phone face down on the armrest, looked at the TV for a while. The Reds gave up another run. I turned it off. Then I opened my banking app. Before I tell you what I found, let me take you back to the Sunday afternoon in March, when I still believed everything was basically fine. I had stopped by Lacey and Bo's house to drop off a birthday present for Declan. He was turning 9, and I got as far as the front porch. That was how it had been for about a year and a half, without me ever naming it. I'd pull up, text that I was there, wait. We'd talk for 8 or 10 minutes in the doorway. Declan and Willa would wave from inside. Then Lacey would say she had to get back to it. That Sunday I noticed, for the first time, that the framed photo of me and Connie at Lacey's wedding was gone from the front hallway. I could see the nail hole from where I stood. In its place was a canvas print of the 4 of them at the Outer Banks. Nice photo. Professional. I told myself they'd redecorated. My wife Connie died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 13 months from diagnosis. She handled everything when she was alive. The birthday cards, the holiday dinners, the Thursday phone calls for no particular reason. She kept a running list on her phone of what the grandkids needed, what sizes they wore, which one was afraid of dogs. When she died, I kept paying attention to those things. I just stopped announcing it. That's how I am. Give me a task, and I'll do it quietly for the next 30 years without mentioning it once. I have an HVAC business, Comfort Systems of Hendricks County. I started it at 29 with a used van and a credit card, and built it into something with 6 employees and a reputation. I should have retired at 55. I pushed it back twice. Once when I covered the down payment on Lacey and Bo's house, and once when I took on the school tuition payments and the math stopped working for my own accounts. I never told anyone either time. It didn't seem like something to mention. After Connie died, Lacey cried in my kitchen and said she didn't know how they were going to keep the catering kitchen going. She and Bo ran a small catering operation out of a rented commercial kitchen on the south side of Indianapolis. Weddings, corporate events. The rent was $1,050 a month and they were 3 months behind. I told her I'd take care of it. I set up the transfer that weekend. A year later, the rent went to $1,150. I adjusted it. I never mentioned it again. Not at a holiday. Not when Bo made a joke about food service margins. Not when they posted photos from Hilton Head for an entire week. The night of the recital photos, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the app for the first time in months. $1,150 a month to the commercial kitchen on Southgate Drive, running 41 months. $490 a month toward Bo's truck loan. His credit had been a problem in 2021. I'd put the loan under my name as a favor and never revisited it. 19 months left. $875 a month to Hamilton Heights Academy, Declan and Willa's private school. A scholarship covered the bulk of it. I covered the gap. 2.5 years running. I did the math on the back of a receipt from my wallet because I needed something to do with my hands. $2,515 every month. Plus the down payment on their house in 2020, $24,000. Plus the dental work for Declan in 2022 when insurance didn't cover what we'd expected, $3,800. Plus the car we'd signed over to Lacey when Connie died, an 18 Accord with 29,000 miles. That I'd never seen a dollar for. Rough total over 5 years, just over $190,000. I closed the app, put the phone face down. There was one thing I needed to know before I did anything else. I called Ned Hollis the next morning. Ned did my books for 12 years before I switched to an accountant in Brownsburg, and we still have lunch every few weeks at a diner on Route 421 where they know his order. I told him the number's flat, the way you describe a system failure to someone who needs to diagnose it. Ned turned his coffee cup in his hands. You know where your retirement should be right now? I know. Not a judgment. I'm asking if you actually know. I know, Ned. He nodded and let it sit there. He's good at leaving things alone. It's probably why he catches fish. What are you going to do? I told him I wasn't sure yet. That was mostly true. Thursday I drove to Hamilton Heights Academy and asked to speak with someone in the registrar's office about the emergency contact records for Declan and Willa Taggart. The woman I spoke with, very politely, told me the primary contacts on file were Lacey and Bo Taggart, and the secondary contacts were Alvin and Glenda, Bo's parents. I asked when the secondary contacts had been added. She pulled up the file, March of last year. 14 months ago. The same month the wedding photo disappeared from the hallway. Somebody had made a call, given a name, said a number out loud, and the number had not included me. I said thank you and drove home. That Saturday, I went to Declan's soccer game. I hadn't been to one in over a year. Nobody had sent me the schedule, and I hadn't thought to look for it myself. I found it on the school's athletics page. Got there 20 minutes early and found a spot in the bleachers. Alvin and Glenda were already set up. Camp chairs, a small cooler, a banner with Declan's number in blue letters. When Declan ran onto the field, he spotted them and waved, the big whole arm kind. Then he saw me. He waved again, smaller, not unfriendly. The way you wave at someone from church you run into at the grocery store. After the game I went over. He let me hug him. He smelled like cut grass and orange slices. He said, "Hey, Grandpa Floyd," easy and without any hesitation. Then Glenda called him over, and he turned to me first and said, "That's Grandma Glenda, and that's Grandpa Alvin." Helpful. Geographic. No hidden meaning in it anywhere. Mom says you're kind of like my grandpa from her side, the one who's not around as much. I looked at him for a second. How far away do you think I live, Declan? He shrugged, far like a drive. 14 miles, I said, from your school. He thought about that. That's not that far. No, I said, it isn't. He ran off. I stood on the sideline for a minute. Then I walked to my truck and sat with the windows down and thought about what a 9-year-old does with information. He uses it for about 4 seconds and moves on. That was right. The damage wasn't his. It never was. If any of this is landing somewhere for you, go ahead and like and subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read all of them. That night I opened the banking app for the second time, and I worked through it top to bottom, the way you work a service panel. The first transfer, kitchen rent $150, I canceled. The app asked if I was sure. I pressed confirm. The second, the truck loan contribution, $490, confirm. The third, the school, $875. I did not cancel. I want to be careful about how I say this, because it's the part people get wrong when they tell the story. That money was for Declan and Willa. It had never been for their parents. What I did instead was drive to the credit union Monday morning and restructure the payment as a direct transfer to Hamilton Heights Academy's registrar account, bypassing Lacey and Bo entirely. Same kids, same school, same amount. I just changed the route. I also called my insurance agent Kirk and had Bo's truck removed from my commercial umbrella policy, where it had been sitting as a covered vehicle for 2 years. Kirk asked if I wanted it effective immediately. I said yes. I wrote a letter on a legal pad that night, 3 sentences. The kitchen support had ended. The truck loan contribution had ended. The school payments were ongoing and had been redirected to the school directly. Lacey could verify with the registrar anytime she wanted. No questions asked. I mailed it Tuesday. Nobody called for 21 days. I'm going to be honest about those 3 weeks, because I think it matters. I expected to feel worse than I did. I took a full rewire job at a medical complex out in Avon. 3 weeks of the kind of work I used to live for before I started handing off the big jobs. I rebuilt the deck steps that had had a soft tread since 2020. I called my sister Nadine for the first time in 4 months, and she drove over and we had coffee. She said the thing I'd needed someone to say out loud for a year. They didn't forget about you, Floyd. They arranged it. I started to say that was too strong a word. She slid her phone across the table. Bo's campaign page. He was running for the county drainage board. Family photo on the banner. Lacey, Bo, both kids, Alvin and Glenda on the farmhouse porch. Rooted in this community, I recognized Willa's green dress. She'd worn it to Declan's school play in February. That photo had been taken 4 months before the recital. The arrangement had been finished long before I found out about it. The recital wasn't the decision. It was just the moment I stumbled across the announcement. Nadine sat back. So here's my question. If they were finished with you in February, why were they still cashing your transfers in May? The first of the month arrived. The kitchen payment didn't clear. Lacey texted me on the 3rd. Dad, I think there's something wrong with the bank. Can you check your end? I read it in a parking lot in Avon at 8 in the morning, put my phone back in my vest and finished the job I was on. That evening I called. She picked up on the second ring. Before I could say anything, Dad, thank God. So the transfer. There's no error, I said. I stopped it. I'm allowed to do that. The sound she made I hadn't heard from her since she was 17. Then Dad, we have a lease. I know. You didn't even warn me. I mailed you a letter 3 weeks ago. Then Bo's voice, close on the speaker, calm in a way that told me he'd been rehearsing this call. Floyd, let's all just take a breath here. I hear you. I think there's been some miscommunication, and I want to get that cleared up. Evening, Bo. So how long are you planning to keep this up? Not what did we do? Not I'm sorry. How long are you planning to keep this up? Like I was a negotiating position he needed to wait out. Then he said the worst thing he could have said. Floyd, you cannot punish 2 little kids over a school performance you weren't even registered for. I let that sit on the line for a full 4 seconds. Oh, get a pen. I don't need. The school payment didn't stop, I said. It was redirected directly to Hamilton Heights on the 1st. Both kids are still enrolled, current, no disruption. Call the registrar in the morning and she'll confirm. Balance as of last Friday is current. Silence. The kitchen and the truck loan are done. Those were for the adults. The school money was always for the kids, and the kids still have it. When Bo came back, his voice had changed shape entirely. You can't unilaterally control that account. It's my money. I opened it. My name is on the arrangement. In 2.5 years, you've never put $1 toward that school. That's really not. In 2022, you used the emergency dental fund I had set aside for the kids to cover a vendor deposit for the business. I didn't say one word about it. I just rebuilt the fund from scratch. Lacey got the phone back. She was crying. The real kind, not the kind that arrives on schedule. Dad, please don't do this to them. I'm not doing anything to them, I said. I stopped doing it for the adults. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, and my hands were shaking. Doing the right thing felt like taking a breath after holding it for far too long. Not good, exactly. Just necessary. Let me stop right here, because this is the part people always ask me about. I've had a full year to sit with this decision, and I want to ask you honestly. If you were me, would you have stopped all of it, including the school money? Or would you have done what I did and kept that one going? Type A if you'd have cut everything. Type B if you'd have done it my way. I read every comment. Alvin showed up at my house on a Thursday morning without calling ahead. I didn't know him well. In 11 years, we'd been in the same room maybe 20 times. He's a retired postal worker from a small town in southern Indiana, quiet in the way of men who've sorted mail for 30 years, and learned that most things don't need commentary. He sat on my porch steps. He didn't mention money, not once the whole visit. They told me you preferred to keep your distance, he said. After your wife passed, Bo said you'd asked for space. I'd never said either of those things to anyone. I've got 2 grandkids from my first marriage, he said, looking out at the street. Outside of Portland, I see them twice a year if the flights work out. A pause. I wouldn't take somebody's place on purpose, Floyd. I need you to know that. You didn't take anything, I said. Somebody handed it to you. We sat there a while without saying much. Alvin is good at sitting, probably from the mail job. Before he left, he stood up and said, Declan's turning 10 next month. Birthday party at our place. You should be there. He paused on the top step. I'll make sure there's a chair. I said I'd think about it. I went. Glenda had organized everything. She's good at it, the way some people are just naturally good at gathering people together. 32 guests in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon in September. 3 neighborhood families, Declan's school friends, Beau's aunts and cousins, a folding table with a cake that said "Double Diggets" in blue icing. I was 3 steps through the gate when Alvin came across the yard. He shook my hand in front of everyone, held it a beat longer than a handshake needs. "Floyd, glad you're here. Come on up." He walked me to the main table. I could feel the backyard recalibrate. 32 people running the same quiet calculation and arriving at different answers. Glenda hadn't set a place for me at the main table. She'd put a folding chair at the end of a side table near the shed. Not cruelly, just a reasonable assumption about who was coming. But Alvin walked to the corner of the main table, picked up a spare chair that had been stacked there, and placed it next to Declan's seat. "Declan," he said it clearly, loud enough to carry, "your Grandpa Floyd's here." Declan looked up from whatever he'd found more interesting than adults. "Grandpa Floyd, how come you get the good seat?" A couple people nearby laughed. Alvin put his hand on the back of the chair, because that's where grandfathers sit. He looked at Declan. "You've got 2 grandfathers here today. That's lucky. Most kids don't get 2. Declan considered this for about a second and a half, filed it as logical, and went back to scanning the yard for the kid with the water balloons. Glenda watched all of it from the drink table. She smiled the way people smile when something has already happened, and there's no useful response left. Then Beau made a toast. He'd had a couple of drinks, and he was relaxed and confident, in his element. He thanked his parents, thanked the neighbors, said something about community, and what it means to be surrounded by people who show up for your kids. And then, because Beau is careful in the way that certain people are careful, he turned slightly toward where I was sitting and said, "That's what family is, right? It's not paperwork. It's not obligation. It's who's actually in the room, showing up." He was smiling when he said it. That's what I keep coming back to. He thought it was a gracious thing to say in front of the man he'd been writing a monthly amount from for 5 years. I set my fork on the tablecloth. "Oh," I said, "can I borrow that for a second?" He looked at me. His mother looked at me. 32 people looked at me. He handed over the little wireless microphone. I stood up. I didn't have anything written down. I'd read what I was going to say enough times in my head on the drive over. "My name is Floyd Denton. I'm Lacey's father and I'm Declan and Willa's grandfather." I kept my voice even. Didn't look at Beau. Beau's right, showing up matters. I've been showing up for 5 years. For 4 of those years, I covered the monthly rent on the commercial kitchen where Lacey and Beau run the catering business. For 2.5 years, I covered the gap in the kids' private school tuition every month. I co-signed the truck loan. I paused a beat. I stopped 2 of those last month. The school payment I didn't stop. I redirected it directly to Hamilton Heights Registrar's office, because that money was always for the kids, and that's where it's going to stay. I looked down the table at Declan, who was watching me with his entire face. I wasn't told about Willa's spring recital. I found out from a Facebook post 2 hours after it ended. I'm not here to embarrass anyone over that. I set my hand on the back of the chair Alvin had placed for me. I'm here because Alvin made sure there was a chair with my name on it. I looked at him. I appreciate that more than I know how to say. I set the microphone on the table and sat down. 4 seconds. I counted, because counting is what I do when I need something to hold on to. Then the man next to Alvin, a neighbor, 20 years on that street, I found out later, started clapping. The woman across from me joined, then the side table by the fence, and most of the yard. Not wild, not a standing ovation. The kind of applause that means a room has quietly made up its mind about something, and has decided to let you hear it. Glenda picked up an empty cup and walked toward the trash can without a word. Beau stood, with his glass still raised, and didn't move for a moment that was longer than he'd probably intended. Declan leaned close to me. He meant it to be quiet, but 10-year-olds don't really have a quiet gear. "Grandpa Floyd, you paid for my school?" "Every month," I said. He looked at me with those serious eyes he gets when he's actually thinking. For real, for real?" "For real, for real." He nodded slowly, filing it somewhere. Then, "Can I have more chips?" I handed him the bowl. I left before the cake. I'd said what I came to say, and I'm not built for the part that comes after. Lacey found me at my truck on the street. No tears this time. That's how I knew we were finally having the real conversation. The one we'd been circling for years. "You humiliated us in front of everyone we know." I said what's true, I said, if the true part. I know what you're about to say. Her arms were crossed. She was looking at the asphalt. Then, who told you about the contact list at the school? I asked. She didn't say anything for a while. Lacey, who told Declan I live far away? She looked up, then away. Glenda said it once at dinner when Declan asked. He repeated it, and she stopped. I didn't correct it, because it was easier than having the argument with Beau every time the subject came up. And then it just became true, the way things do when nobody fixes them. I know. And the recital. A long pause. Beau said the auditorium would be too crowded. I told myself you probably wouldn't want to come to something like that anyway. I told myself that a lot, about a lot of things. That wasn't true. I know it wasn't true, Dad, she said it quietly. I know. I reached into the truck and took the envelope from the dashboard. I'd had it there for 3 days. Inside, the Hamilton Heights registrar's direct number, both kids' account numbers, the current balance, and a note that she could call any time without going through me. No permission required. You don't need anything from me to check on any of that, I said. It's yours to look at whenever you want. She took it with both hands. Standing in the street in September in the early evening, she looked for a moment like the girl who used to bring me coffee in a toy mug while I worked on the truck in the driveway. She'd never stopped doing things like that. Somewhere along the way, I just stopped being inside when she knocked. Are we going to be okay, Dad? I thought about it honestly, because she'd earned honest. I don't know, I said, but we're finally having the right conversation. We've never managed that before. She got in her car. I watched her go. A year does a lot of quiet work. I sold 40% of the business to a technician named Damon, who came up through the trade and can diagnose a refrigerant leak by sound in a way I couldn't do until I was 40. He runs the big commercial jobs. I take the service calls that interest me, and I'm usually home by 4. Declan and Willa come over Saturday mornings, 1st and 3rd of every month. That was the agreement we made. Small, clear, and real. Last month I showed Declan how an air handler works. He stood on the stool Connie used to use to reach the high shelves and asked 17 questions in a row, and not one of them was a bad question. He calls me Grandpa Floyd every time, without hesitation, without preamble. He has never once mentioned anything about driving distances, or how many grandfathers a person is allowed to have. Willa calls Alvin Grandpa Alvin and me Grandpa Floyd. She's 6. She doesn't see whatever distinction troubled the adults for so long. That's exactly right. That's how it should work. The catering kitchen. Lacey's lease on Southgate Drive ended in August. She found a shared commercial kitchen space with 2 other small caterers. Lower overhead, built-in coverage for big event weekends. She negotiated the new arrangement herself. She called me the week she signed to tell me about it, not to ask for anything, just to say she'd done it. In October, she called again. The business had covered all its costs for the month without touching their personal savings. Small margin. But it was there, and it was real, and she'd built it herself. She sounded like someone who'd surprised herself and wasn't sure yet whether to trust it. I didn't say I knew she had it in her. That would have been the wrong thing. I just said, good. Ned tells me my retirement projections are back on track for 59. I've stopped pushing the date back. Willa's fall kindergarten performance was November 14th at 6 in the evening. On October 28th, Lacey sent me a text. Willa has her school show on the 14th at 6. Do you want to come? I typed back, yes. That was it. No explanation, no qualifiers. November 14th, I got there 20 minutes early and took a seat in the 3rd row. I'd brought a small bunch of yellow flowers. I remembered that Willa's favorite color was yellow because I'd asked her directly 2 Saturdays ago, while she was sorting through the spare parts bin in my garage by color. She'd said yellow without looking up, like a fact she'd always known, and assumed everyone already had. When the kindergartners filed out in their construction paper costumes, Willa found me in about 4 seconds. Her whole face opened up. She waved with both hands, the overhead kind, the kind that leaves no room for any interpretation other than the obvious one. I waved back. I stayed for the whole thing. I had a seat in the 3rd row, and my name had been on the text that put me there, 17 days before I walked through the door. And when I counted heads in that little auditorium, I was in the number before the lights even went down. That's not a victory. I want to be honest about that. It's not the end of something hard. And it's not the beginning of something easy. It's just the right place to start from. The kind of place where somebody made a list, and when they made it, they put your name on it before you arrived. That's all most of us are really looking for. Not the center chair, not the spotlight, just the knowledge that somewhere a seat exists with your name written on it, and that the writing happened before you walked in the door. And if nobody's been writing your name on that list for years, you're allowed to stop setting the table for everyone else.